for watching Power Breakfast right here on Citizen TV. This is a Power Breakfast, a news review with me, Fred Indimuli. This morning, a very privileged to have with us. Let me start off with a lady, Professor Jacqueline Odwol, nominated member of the National Assembly, nominated by ODM. This is your very first time on the news review. Karibu sana. It's good to have you. Next to Professor Odwol, we do have Caleb Kositani, member of the National Assembly, representing Soi constituency, of course on a Jubilee Party ticket. Also your very first time on this news review panel. Karibu sana, congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on this panel. Next to Bwana Kositani, we do have a senator from Mombasa County, Mohamed Faki. Also your very first time on this news review panel.
Yes.
Congratulations on your win in Mombasa, na karibu sana.
Thank you.
Next to me, we do have a senator from Kiambu, Kimani Wamatangi, of course a very familiar face on the news review panel. Good to have you, Senator.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Good morning.
Of course, the headlines today have to do with this talks by the IEBC, which kicked off yesterday between Jubilee NASA representatives and the IEBC with regard to ironing out some of the issues before the presidential rerun. Those talks were stalled rather, and this is captured on the headlines on the front pages. The talks stalled because of what is happening in Parliament. Jubilee has decided to go ahead and introduce electoral amendments or amendments to the electoral laws even before the repeat presidential election of October 26. So the Daily Nation reads, Uhuru plans law change as Raila digs in on demos. Jubilee sets stage for introduction of changes to the election law before repeat poll. NASA insists it will hold mass protests every Monday and Friday until top IEBC staff leave office. Also on that same story, Matiang'i confirms security for opposition chiefs scaled down, accusing the leaders of lawlessness. On the front page of the Standards, IEBC parties talks stall over poll laws. Crucial meeting pushed to today after Orengo insisted the Uhuru team must first withdraw bill on election laws before talks on rerun can't start. But before all that, of course, there's another headline that we have to just probably make a quick comment on, and that's what's captured on the front page of the Standard. PS El Maui dies in South Africa after a Lamu attack. That story is on page 7 of the Standard. And probably I give my panelists a quick 15 seconds to send your messages of condolence to the family of the late PS. Let's start with the professor.
I want to take this opportunity to express sincere condolences to the family of PS El Maui. As we noted yesterday, the President remarked that this is a leader who served with distinction, and we really want to ensure that we work to make Kenya safe,
yes,
to protect lives.
Well, on behalf of myself and the people of Soy and my family, I want to pass my condolences to the family of the late PS. I never got to meet her, but from what I have heard from people who have interacted with her, she was a very dedicated servant of the people. And being an architect, as lady architect, that was someone who had really achieved a lot. And it's very sad that we had to lose her to a terrorist attack. We pray for the family.
Yeah. Senator?
Yes, the late Mariam Maui was a sister to me. We enrolled together in Nairobi University in 1987, where she took architecture and I studied law. After that, she worked as an architect with distinction. And it's a sad loss, not only to the people of Mombasa and the coast, but the whole country. She was a role model to our girls in Mombasa and the coast.
Okay. Finally, Senator.
Oh yeah, it's noteworthy that Al-Mawi is actually the first leader, the first top government official to be lost to Al-Shabaab in the fight against terrorism. And in tandem with my colleagues, I want to give my very sincere and heartfelt condolences to her family, to the entire fraternity of her county, and especially to the women leaders and the distinction makers of this country. She's been a star in especially the work that she did. I met her a few times, and she was just a dedicated person. By the way, Fred, very few people knew that she was still being hospitalized. Actually, at the announcement yesterday, most of the people were shocked.
Yes, that she was still in hospital.
She was still in hospital. I think people thought that she'd recovered, she's out and about. So I believe that the country has lost a dedicated person. My condolences to you.
On behalf of the entire Citizen TV family, I also take the opportunity to send condolences to the family of former Public Works Principal Secretary Mariam El-Mawi, who died while being treated in South Africa for injuries she sustained in the July Al-Shabaab attack. Let's now delve into the headlines today, and of course the big one is what's happening in Parliament. Yesterday, Jubilee for the first time used its numbers to actually ensure there's a special sitting of the National Assembly today to discuss this changes to the electoral law, which have now resulted in this stalled talks at Bomas. This story is on the front page of the Standard, is also on the front page of the Daily Nation, but the story is in the inside pages, including what exactly they're trying to change. If we look at page 6 of the Daily Nation, bill to change law stalls talks on election. Now this bill talks about quite a number of issues. One of them, of course, is the fact that Jubilee wants manual transmission of results to be the primary mode of transmission. That could be a major change. Remember, on August the 8th, electronic transmission was the main mode of transmission of results. They also want the Supreme Court made to order for a recount in case of any election dispute. Yes. The other change they want is that the vice chairperson of the IEBC can take over from the chairman in case the chairman is not available. Now, these are just some of them. But yes, for the very first time, Jubilee used its numbers, and NASA could not do anything about it. Members were there. We saw quite a number of ODM members and members from other NASA affiliate parties, but there's nothing they could do about it. 83 to 32 voted for a special sitting today. This is a Thursday. Parliament usually has sittings only in the afternoon. They're going to have a special sitting today morning to discuss those laws. Professor Jacqueline Dudwal, this just goes to show how those numbers will be used going forward. Yesterday, this happened, and there's nothing you could have done about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fred. And I want to appreciate opportunity to be representing the National Assembly here, because I'm glad to have my colleagues here from Parliament, from the Senate. I think at this point of our country, especially as parliamentarians, whether we are in the National Assembly or the Senate, we are called upon to rise, to be the leaders that are required by those that we represent. And I would say, Fred, that it is clear that when you go into National Assembly, or even if you are in the Senate, there is a sense in which it is clear that you have a majority party and you have a minority party. But I am encouraged because I'm nominated. I ran for office in 2007. I didn't get elected, but I have continued because of my conviction that I have a duty, not only to my country, Kenya, but in particular that women are called upon to bring a difference in terms of how they engage, to sort of look not necessarily always with their head, but occasionally to look at issues with their heart. And so I'm encouraged that as a legislator, when thinking about how to engage, I remember that the most critical thing is for me to look at problems. Because when you get into Parliament and your key role is oversight, is legislation, is representation, my understanding and why I've always wanted to get into Parliament and why I want to thank my party for giving me a chance is that you do need some law and order, and you need a sense of direction, and that legislation should primarily be driven by problems in society or by aspirations that you have. And the concept of democracy, of course, would always indicate that you're going to find that the majority would hold the day. But I am glad that in a way, as we look at our National Assembly, our Speaker continues, and even our Majority Leader continues to remind us that we are not talking now of those in the opposition and those who are in government, but we talk about the majority and the minority.
But Professor, that is the ideal situation that should actually prevail in the National Assembly, but looking at the situation currently, that's not it. There's still a very clear division. And maybe probably after a few months, after the House continues with its sittings, probably that understanding that you need to look beyond your party affiliation and think beyond that and look at yourself as a legislator, that could come in then. But now it's not happening. Right now everyone is looking at it as, am I a Jubilee member first? Am I an ODM member first? And what is my party line of thought? And that's what I'm saying, because Bwana Kositani, it looks rather clear that whatever electoral amendments Jubilee brings to the House will definitely pass because of the numbers, sheer numbers. Don't you think there's a risk involved? Yes, you come from the Jubilee party. Well, as you understand, the kind of ideal situation that Professor Odul tries to portray the National Assembly as being or meant to be is not the reality right now. Jubilee members will vote Jubilee the Jubilee way. Don't you think there's a risk involved?
Fred, we've just come from an election, and the main purpose why you go for an election is to try and garner the majority will of the majority for you to govern. We had about 15-point-something million people turning up for the polls. 8.2 million voted for Jubilee, and the rest voted for ODM and the other NASA and the other aspirants. Meaning, majority of Kenyans are with Jubilee, and they have given the majority. They've given us the majority to govern. So I think whatever is happening in Parliament, whatever laws we pass, are for the majority of Kenyans, whom we represent. That's why we have a majority in the governors, we have a majority in the women reps elected, majority in senators, majority in Parliament, majority even in MCS. So it's democracy is that way. Sadly, so our democracy in Kenya, that is the way. The person who has the most votes, that is the person who governs. And we have the saying that in a democracy, you'll have the majority will have their way, the minority will have their say, and that is how we are going to.
But what about the risk?
One thing I'd also like to say, Fred, is I always want to say this whenever I get an opportunity. Is I voted no when we were voting for the Constitution, but yes carries the day. Am I left out because I voted no? No. It is my constitution. I am living with it now. I have adjusted to although we're still having teething problems, but I've adjusted, and this is our constitution. And as we move along, we're going to be modifying it as we move along.
Because the risk I'm talking about is the fact that some of these changes to the election laws are far-reaching and will affect the entire country. And probably some of these things should have been bipartisan, but because of the emotions culminating from that Supreme Court judgment, Jubilee Party felt aggrieved. There were emotions, and they are going ahead to effect some changes.
The changes we are bringing in,
don't you think there's a risk?
The changes we are bringing in, first of all, you're reading from the media. The bill has not been made public yet. We will know about it this morning. So we will not go exactly by what you're saying. But one, I don't know why people are fearing for us to pass a law that if we fail, the electronic system fails, then the manual becomes the primary. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? Even just the other day, Germany have voted. They are going for an election, and they said categorically they don't want electronic, they want manual. And that is a country that is far ahead of us. So what is wrong with us having both options? Because we are in this situation where we are now. The victory of Jubilee, the victory of President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Deputy President William Ruto was annulled because of technicalities, not because of the manual count of votes. And we also want the IEBC or even the Supreme Court to be ordered before you annul an election, have a recount. Whatever anomalies were there, did they really affect the total number of votes cast for each candidate? No. Then swear in President Uhuru in that matter.
Okay. Senator Mohamed Fakir, of course, your side of Parliament could simply be against these proposals simply because you're not in Jubilee. Yes, but probably some of those proposals are actually necessary given the kind of judgment that the Supreme Court came up with. Don't you think we are missing an opportunity to actually discuss properly some of these changes that should and could be effected?
Not really, because we had an amendment in the course of this year which was sponsored by the bipartisan committee of both the Senate and the National Assembly. And coming from where we had been before, where there were situations where people will be asked to, the agents will be asked to leave the polling station. Ballot papers and boxes are stuffed in police lorries, then transported to the constituency tallying center in the previous elections. So the idea of this electronic tallying and relaying of the results was because people wanted to avoid situations where third parties will interfere with the process. And that interference was there in the last presidential election. So the Supreme Court made the decision on the basis that the presidential election, in terms of tallying and relaying the results, was not done in accordance with the law. Now, we cannot immediately after the Supreme Court decision move to the Parliament and start to amend the laws so that we can cater for the manual, because already the country is in an electioneering process. The presidential election is due on the 26th of October. We had not even looked at the whole election process and decided whether the election was annulled merely because there was no alternative system, or that the system failed because of human errors and inconsistencies. So what we are saying is this, that at the moment it is premature for us to amend these laws. And in fact, you cannot take away the discretion of the court in terms of ordering a recount or opening of the ballot boxes.
Yes, Senator Wamatangi, some of the proposals that have not even been mentioned on the dailies, and I agree, the 3 proposals, I do not know if they will actually be in the actual bill.
Yeah.
In as far as changing how the Supreme Court works, actually forcing that it has to be a 2/3 majority ruling, how the IEBC, which is an independent commission, works, as well. Out of the 7 commissioners, that 5 have to vote one way for it to pass. Some of these things are purely because Jubilee feels aggrieved. Don't you think that is a wrong approach to change laws? That probably it should be more objective, not based on emotion, not based on anger, that the Supreme Court judgment did not go your way?
Well, two quick things I would want to say. First, now remember, Fred, we had this discussion as a country for a long time. When Jubilee was in its formation, and we invited a lot of political parties to join us in further, NASA in its own way followed probably a closer script, although not necessarily like we did. You see, the agitation that must be understood across the board is that parties now must start to internalize and reform, such that what parties stand for can be similed against what the interests of the country are, and such that, you know, the principles, the manifestos of political parties now can be pillars that can be pursued in a political process way beyond the cycle of probably one session of parliament, or even the lifetime of a politician. And so, you know, in that thinking, if you look at, for example, most of the advanced democracies in the United States, where we have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, those parties have got such strong pillars in their manifestos, their ethos and credos, such that you find that if you have a president who ran this time, it is quite in order and it works well for the country when you have a next one who comes in to pursue the same principles. What am I saying? I'm saying that similarly, when you have members of, for example, Jubilee in Parliament, or NASA for that matter, it is not utterly wrong that you would say that they are pursuing the agenda of a party.
Are you genuinely saying that, Senator?
You would not, in pursuit of what the reforms now should bring. You see, the problem we've had, and it's understandable, Fred, the cynicism that because before, political parties have just been vehicles you can hop on, win an election and hop out, go pursue your things, wait for another new formation during an election, jump in. So when we say that, when we talk about the tyranny of numbers about Jubilee in the party, you know, one thing, let's agree there are no apologies to make about that, because that's the way democracy works. Two, we want to see such a scenario whereby we'll be saying that we have a strong party that indeed stands for ideals that resonate with the common person. Now, coming down to what we are saying should be reformed, you know, unless we are so dishonest that we'll be saying that yes, the Supreme Court in its own wisdom, I would say, then made their determination, and they have ruled that this election was marred by irregularities and other, aspects they call illegalities, although they were unable to find them. We would be very dishonest as leaders if we didn't pursue and say, then what are these irregularities that have found us in this, gotten us into this scenario, and let's reform them. Now look at some of the things that you have pointed out here. For example, on the Supreme Court itself, and when they make judgment, what formation should they be, what powers in the Supreme Court Act should they continue to have, is it democratically and legally acceptable that a Supreme Court can listen to all that, presentations by lawyers and arrive at a decision before justifying the decision and say, you serve the sentence before we tell you how you're serving the sentence.
Did you have this problem? Did you have this problem before the election was announced?
Some of these aspects, Fred, whether we like it or not, including, for example, when you have IEBC, should IEBC, the deputy, the vice chair, should they be able to take up the role of the chair in case the chair is
my question is,
secondly,
some of these problems, you never had them. You did not have a problem with the chairperson of the vice chairperson.
It is really not. Fred, we know, me and you, and every politician here knows that our elections are manual. And the Supreme Court confirmed that according to the minor Kiai ruling, the election of a person ends when the presiding officer at the polling station announces the result. In a manual process, you go and cast in your ballot, it's lifted, they count them after emptying, and that's the end of the election. The rest is transmission. When urging that there should be...
My question to you,
yes.
And the issue is, it's about the timing. And I'm saying that some of these changes are being introduced based on emotions. That probably, if we waited until after the repeat election of October 26th and come sit down and relook at these laws, the same way it took a long time to actually come up with the constitution of the Supreme Court, and no one saw it fit that it had to be a 2/3 majority ruling by the Supreme Court. That was conversed by the whole country.
Yeah, but
but now don't you think that some of these proposals, and I have to say it clearly that yes, I do not know if it will be part of that bill, but it's been reported in the media.
Yes.
Don't you think that some of these things could be major changes, but you're only pursuing those changes based on emotion that you will feel aggrieved by the Supreme Court?
Absolutely not. I want to also firmly say, looking directly at that camera, that it is absolutely not because we are emotional or we have any reason to be emotional. But we should be informed correctly by the ruling.
I think I need to come in. I think I need to come in here now, Fred. And it's a beautiful thing that as I started, I laid the foundation. And I think not only have you had, but the Kenyans have had. You really need to look at the political parties in this country. We now have many, but we can put, in terms of the key, if you like, protagonists right here, is Jubilee and NASA. And I really appreciate Senator Kimani Wamatangi indicating that you need to look at the ideals of the party. And I would like to say humbly that my submission is that we've had a long journey. And the journey has been one to reform. And the journey has been one to try and see ways in which we can ensure that Kenya as a nation would be celebrating the very spirit of the Constitution 2010. And I would like to emphasize that as we talk about democracy, we do not want to have results which are in themselves seen to be suspect or seen to have had challenges. And it is very clear, and as we look not only at the timing, but we look at the content, and we look at the manner in which we are burying in the sand the very issue that has brought us to this day. I am a member of the National Assembly. I was yesterday in session, but I had just stepped out and I was unable to get in because, as you know, at some point after the bell rings, you're not able to get in. But I did get in after that. And I will, when I get a chance, continue to do so. Why? Because when we have a process that is seen to be for the people, in the interest of the people, it is understandable that you could get a chance in which you get the majority, and Senator did indicate this, that the majority will of course have their way, but the minority have their say. I say, as a minority, that the whole issue of the tyranny of numbers in itself is suspect. You see, when we want to be really keen to talk to Kenyans, and we are doing this, and I want to thank citizens for giving us this opportunity, we do not want to have a situation where we chest thumb and where we as leaders misguide our people who are the voters. I think it is a very key issue for us to really calm down. Whether we are in the National Assembly or we are in the Senate, we cannot run away from the fact that August 8th, the way it happened, there were a lot of concerns. And we want to thank the Supreme Court that what they did was say there were illegalities. It has opened the space. Go out, find out what those illegalities are, and we want to thank Justice Maraga for saying, let us have fidelity to the rule of law. Let us have fidelity, indeed, to the sense of nationhood. We also had a very clear indication that there were irregularities. If I might just give one example, because I know Honorable Senator Wamatangi said that it was not clear what the illegalities were. I think we are all aware that we had a clear understanding of the law, that we would make the announcement at the constituency level. And I think one of the key challenges that we cannot run away from is that Kenyans woke up, I was there, I voted, and we saw figures playing on the screen. We cannot also run away from the fact that in court, it was submitted that these were statistics, these were data. So I would like to remind my honorable colleagues that it is indeed true that we do have tyranny of numbers, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate. But when we look at the very issue that are bedeviling us on August 8th, the very tyranny is in itself suspect. So please, what we would like to ensure we do not miss, and this for me is why I was very happy to be here on this show. We are leaders. We are politicians, but we are leaders. Leaders have a responsibility, and we are going to ensure that to the extent that is possible, the minority in National Assembly will have their say, and the minority
that means
will...
you will attend today's session?
Well, I think in a way, what we need to do is to look at what value addition we would make. And I think, as you noted yesterday, that there were members who were there in the assembly. The idea would be to go and to speak to Kenyans and to help Kenyans to see that you cannot go to make law for an interest that is not for the whole country. The country right now is at a point where you cannot really come, and the very independent institutions that saved this country on August 8th from going to the point we were in 2007, you want to come in an August House and you want to say this is the way to go. So I'm hoping that Kenyans listening, and I'm hoping that everybody listening will think through this.
Don't you think it could be counterproductive if you rush through some of these laws? Because yes, right now it is a Jubilee thing, and probably, do you think it is necessary, really necessary, to rush through these amendments now?
It is very necessary because of the reasons given by the 4 judges for annulling the presidential
even going as far as touching the constitution of the Supreme Court.
Remember what Chief Justice Maranga said as he was finalizing his ruling, that if the elections were held again and we found these irregularities, Form 34A was not signed, this paper was not signed, but the results is there, stagnant, so and so has won, President Uhuru has won, but there are still some digital things here that didn't add up, they will annul the election again. So we're trying to avoid that. We want to make it a fact that at the time you are annulling a presidential election, it is in black and white that yes, the results do not tally, the results do not match with what the Akel Mwananchi wanted, and let us go back let us go for a fresh elections. Another thing that we need to agree, as Mheshimiwa Professor Oduor here has said, is that as a people, we belong to our parties, but at the end of the day we are leaders. Whatever we are passing is for the good of this country. It is a law that will govern elections from time to time and until when we get to the end of the world. But the most important thing is, whenever you come across a mistake, Do you go back and repeat the same mistake?
But you're saying
you rectify.
like,
if you are going, if you,
the perception is that some of these mistakes are only being seen from the point of Jubilee.
Yes.
That the other side.
Yes,
is
because
not
our victory was annulled. It was stolen at the Supreme Court. So what we are saying, we have the majority. When we go to our constituencies, you get an old mama who was taken to the woken up very early. Go, let's go and vote. She goes and votes. She comes back and tells me, Mheshimiwa Caleb, I voted for you. I voted for Uhuru and Ruto. Thank you very much. What do I go and tell her now? She tells me now, you people didn't tell us properly that there was another paper. She just hears on the screen 34. She says, there's another paper that you people did not bring to the polling station. Which other one is this? So we want to answer that Mama Boga there. We want to answer that Wanjiko at the grassroots and tell her now, go and vote. Our voting is manual, as Senator Matiang'i said. You go, you're given the ballot paper. You go and tick it, you personally put it in the box. The agents are there, they open the seals. They open the seals, they count the votes right there. And they're announced there. There's this form.
Yes.
Nobody has disputed that those results that were streaming, in one station, Caleb got 10 votes, and here he's been given 500 votes. Even the Supreme Court did not come out with any figure whatsoever, that Raila got X number of votes and Uhuru got X number of votes, but they were interchanged. They didn't come up. They never had a problem with the figures. So what we're doing now is we're trying to safeguard. And Uhuru is not going to run for president for life. Neither is Raila. There are going to be other people running for president in the future. And this law is going to safeguard whoever wins. Is going to safeguard everybody's victory.
You disagree, Senator?
Yes, I disagree. First of all, as parliamentarians, they are an independent arm of the government. So they have to consider the public interest in passing these amendments. Number two, there were doubts as to the figures which were given by IBC. In fact, the figures which were streaming were said to be just statistics. They were not the true figures. When they were called upon to provide in court, that's what they said in court. When they were called upon to provide the actual figures, they never provided any figures. So what we are saying is that it is first of all premature to push these amendments because there is an impending election which is coming up on the 26th. Already the two parties have submitted their candidates. Therefore the process is already going on, and therefore we cannot amend the rules in the middle of the game. Okay. Number two, you cannot also take away the Supreme Court power to order a recount or whatever orders they wish to make, because in a situation where there are more than one judge making a decision, the decision can be 2-1, it can be 3, yeah, it can be whatever decision that will be made on the basis of the conscience of that particular judge. So you cannot say you cannot pass a law and say that the decision should be 2/3 majority in any case. And in any case, in this particular Supreme Court decision, it was a 2/3 majority, 4 against 2. So what we are saying is that it is actually premature now, yes, to be able to push the amendments in view of the fact that even IBC had not conducted a forensic audit of their systems and found out where the failure was. Okay.
Time now for us to take a break. When we come back, we continue with this discussion because now this appears to be Jubilee's side of the hardline stance. Remember, NASA are still insisting on their irreducible minimums, and that has resulted in this stalemate, which now features on the front page of the Standard. IBC parties talks stall over poll laws. Yes, there are those amendments to the electoral laws, and there's NASA's irreducible minimums. Now we're not talking. That after the break.